July 1943, northern France. Night falls over a velvet void, the air trembling with gunpowder haze and the soft percussion of distant flak. A thin thread of moonlight brushes the wings of a German Ju 88, easing through layered clouds. Inside the cockpit, 4 men lean forward into the dark, eyes narrowed, each breath amplified in the confined aluminum shell. For years, this sky had been their sanctuary, a place where darkness itself fought on their side. The altimeter hums. Condensation crawls across glass. Below them, faint anti-aircraft bursts shimmer near the coastline. Brief constellations of orange before sinking again into black. The pilot, Oberleutnant Küster, steadies his gloved hands on the throttle. He smiles slightly. The British searchlights have retreated tonight. The airwaves feel empty. Perfect conditions. But above his aircraft, 2,000 feet higher, another kind of hunter circles. A de Havilland Mosquito, the wooden wonder of British aviation, slides across the night invisible to radar returns. Its twin Merlin engines whisper instead of roar. Inside its narrow cockpit, the smell of cold oil and sweat fills the oxygen masks. The pilot, Alan Smythe, keeps one hand on the control column, the other tapping impatiently at the radar scope between them. On that cathode screen glows a trembling echo, an apparition no human eye could ever see from here. The voice of his radar operator crackles through static. Contact. Range 1,200 yards and closing. Smythe tilts the aircraft's nose, descending into the black. Below, Küster feels something, a vibration he can't place. Air pressure flickers against his eardrums. He glances out the canopy, sees nothing, only cloud and absence. Then, for an instant, a trace of movement, the faintest shimmer of exhaust, no bigger than a firefly. Before his brain can name it, the Mosquito opens fire. Cannon rounds stitch silently through the air, each impact snapping metal like tearing cloth. The Ju 88 lurches, glass fragments whip across the cabin. One engine bursts into flame, orange tongues licking the wing root. Inside, chaos, orders, screams, a desperate attempt to jettison fuel. Every instrument glows hellish red as the bomber begins to roll. Smythe pulls up in one clean motion, the recoil rumbling down the fuselage. He doesn't cheer, he doesn't look back. They never look back. He watches his radar screen instead, where the bright echo fades to nothing. The camera of history rises with him, above the falling wreck, revealing an entire front of war most civilians never understood. A battle fought not by daylight or formation, but by pulse, frequency, and invisible mathematics. Back on the coast, British ground controllers mark coordinates quietly in graphite. They log time of interception. Error point 47 hours. Another successful kill. To them it's data. To the men in the bomber, it's the end of the world. The narration slows, reflective. For 3 years since the Blitz, German bombers had roamed these skies uncontested. Nights were their armor, darkness their fortress. But tonight, something has shifted. The darkness is no longer neutral. It chooses sides. Radar, the word itself still new, has become weapon and shield, prophet and assassin. Invisible radio waves now guide bullets before pilots even glimpse their enemies. The age of faith in unseen safety dies as quickly as that burning bomber over France. From the ground, farmers woken by the thunder watch, a streak of fire trace across the horizon, bewildered. The glow dissolves behind the hedgerows, silent again within seconds, and yet overhead, pulse signals continue to whisper like distant hearts. To the British crews returning to base, this night is victory. To the Luftwaffe command still unaware in their bunkers hundreds of miles east, it is just another patrol gone missing. In the ledgers of Berlin, the loss will look ordinary, taken by flak, lost in cloud, routine. But history has just turned a corner that routine cannot disguise. Technology has tipped the balance in the oldest contest of war. Who sees first? The soundtrack fades to a low hum, the static of early electronics, faint, rhythmic, almost like breathing. The narrator's voice narrows to a whisper. No one in Berlin yet realized. This was only the opening act of a war fought without daylight. While wreckage burned in the French fields, far from the front lines, a handful of British scientists struggled with a rumor that somewhere inside a humming metal box lay the power to see through night itself. The wreckage in France still burns when our view pulls back, across the channel, across time, back to a Scotland laboratory months before that flaming descent. Fluorescent tubes buzz overhead, rain claws at the windows of RAF Drem. Inside, A handful of engineers and pilots crowd around a table stacked with oscilloscopes, coils, and the heavy brass casing of a contraption that hums faintly, like a living creature dreaming in metal. The calendar says February 1942. Britain is barely breathing between nightly raids. Yet in this small windowless hut, someone is trying to teach a machine to see the unseen. This is Airborne Interception Radar Mk IV. AI, they call it, half joke, half prayer. Cables snake across concrete floors, their insulations sticky with dust. A cathode ray tube flickers, painting ghost green arcs in the dark. Each pulse of light travels out into nothing, then returns with the faintest of replies, a whisper from the clouds. A young radar operator named Peter Jennings watches the display as if it were a heartbeat. Most of the time the screen shows only static, the hiss of cosmic noise. But then, on rare, perfect nights, a small curve rises, distant and uncertain. Maybe weather, maybe an enemy. He learns to read personality in noise, to feel when a signal means something. Outside, technicians tow a twin-engine bow fighter across the tarmac, its fuselage already scarred from test flights. The plan is madness, critics insist. Stick this ungainly 50-kilogram radar into the nose of a combat aircraft and trust it not to short-circuit mid-air. Absurd. Yet desperation makes faith easier. Britain has lost too many nights, too many cities. The work proceeds like a siege against physics. Every failure smells of singed copper and overheated valves. They adjust frequency, recalibrate amplifiers, argue about antenna length until dawn. A simple problem. See an airplane at night. Turns out to contain everything. Electricity, timing, courage, patience. The narration widens. Across the channel, German intelligence analysts receive intercepted reports describing a new British Funkmesker 8. Their response? Laughter. They believe no radar could possibly be small enough to fit in an aircraft's nose. The Luftwaffe already controls the night with ground-based systems. They are certain supremacy is built into geography itself. In Berlin's offices, arrogance hardens into policy. Back at Drem, the opposite mood rules. A faith drawn not from power, but necessity. During test flights, Jennings sits behind the pilot in cramped blackness, surrounded by the smell of glue and freezing metal. The radar hum climbs in his ears. Thin green arcs sweep across the circular screen, returning faint peaks whenever a target reflects their invisible finger of energy. The peaks grow, shift right, grow again. He shouts over the intercom, "Steady bearing, closing, 200 yards." The pilot adjusts trim. Outside, the darkness remains absolute. He sees nothing, no lights, no stars, only instruments. Then a shape materializes, a bomber, dim and enormous. The pilot's gloved finger tightens on the trigger. The first human kill guided by airborne radar is seconds away. The weapon proves itself not by brilliance, but by silence. The documentary voice slows, reverent. With that burst of gunfire, a new language of war is born, one written in pulses, measured in microseconds. Every future night will now hinge on invisible timing. Elsewhere, scientists note the data dispassionately. Range 1 mile, accuracy within 20 yards, beam width 3 degrees. Numbers, yes, but each number is a revelation. By spring, the prototype becomes doctrine. The Airborne Interception Radar Mk IV is standardized, installed across fighter squadrons from Norfolk to Yorkshire. The Air Ministry's announcement is brief and coded, classified as general equipment improvement. But among pilots, rumors spread. Crews whisper about the sightless eye, the device that makes darkness loud enough to hear. In London, planners debate which aircraft should carry it. The final answer seems almost accidental. A lightweight, all-wood fighter with no defensive guns and a speed no enemy bomber can match. The de Havilland Mosquito, the perfect host for an invisible predator. Down at Drem, Jennings signs off from another test flight. His voice recorder captures the last line of his log. Target acquired by instruments alone. It sounds innocuous, but it means eternity has just blinked. The narration narrows, nearly whispers. For centuries, darkness was humankind's oldest ally and oldest fear. Tonight, someone has pierced it with a signal that, by every rule of the old world, shouldn't exist. When those first radar-guided fighters took off from their Scottish airfields, the night itself began to switch allegiances. And soon, every screen in Britain would be watching the same trembling green line. The night that radar proved itself over France didn't end with victory. It ended with a question. Who was actually watching the watchers fade up? A map table glowing in the darkness of a concrete operations room. Hundreds of miles from the front, chalk lines, coloured pins, cigarette smoke pooling against the low ceiling. On every wall, luminous plotting boards hum with quiet voltage. Time, 2 a.m. Late 1942. Place, RAF Bentley Priory, the heart that beat behind every British interception. We inhale the rhythm of it. Paper rustling, telephones clattering, the faint mechanical sweep of radar beams turning on the horizon. The war's new orchestra no longer needs daylight to play its symphony. Every note is a signal, every silence, a threat. Months earlier, the first airborne radars had whispered promise. Now that promise has grown teeth. An entire network of ground-based stations, Chain Home, is awake, manned 24 hours a day. From Dover to the north of Scotland, their twin towers stare eastward, pulsing invisible energy out into the black Atlantic. When enemy aircraft cross the curtain, tiny echoes return like the heartbeat of approaching ghosts. The screen's phosphor breathes green. An operator traces a moving spot with a grease pencil. Her hand calm, her hair tucked under regulation curls. She is 19. Call sign, Starlight. Behind her, another voice relays bearing and altitude to a filter room where older officers transform flickering dots into coordinates. Within seconds, those numbers reach a control tower miles away, translating into an order no human eye could have given. Vector 270, Angels 10. Intercept heading confirmed. The pilots never see the faces of these women, yet they trust them with their lives. Inside the cockpits above, they know only the steady calm of radio voices, always female, oddly maternal in the chaos, guiding them through storm and fear. Steady, left 5 degrees, target now 10 miles. Its choreography conducted across the airwaves, frighteningly precise, heartbreakingly personal. Outside those rooms, the island waits under blackout. Cities vanish beneath curtains. Coastal towns extinguish every light. Yet, from within the radar stations, Britain shines more brightly than ever. An invisible grid of awareness stitched across sea and sky. The narrator's tone shifts. Admiration edged with unease. The miracle of detection carries its own cost. The more the system sees, the more unforgiving it becomes. A blip misplaced, a second's hesitation, and an entire squadron may die. These quiet clerks of the electromagnetic age bear responsibility measured not in miles, but in minutes. They call it the Map of Fear. Now cross the Channel, France, 1943. Luftwaffe bombers idle on dimly lit runways at Rennes and Abbeville, frost glittering on propeller blades. Crews huddle over navigation charts, their breath fogging lanterns as they trace new routes designed to slip between British radar beams. They call the gaps holes in the curtain. But the holes are closing fast. Every improvement in British signal processing, better discrimination, faster computers, narrower beams, reduces the space where German pilots can hide. What once felt like an open continent of night now shrinks to a corridor barely wide enough for hope. In the sky, this technological chess mirrors human chess. Ground controllers move their pieces. The Beaufighter squadrons, the new Mosquito detachments. The tone of the film tightens as the narrator counts time between detection and interception. 10 minutes, then 6, then 3. The margin between life and annihilation collapses to the thickness of a heartbeat. Still, inside those operations rooms, composure remains sacred. The women with grease pencils keep moving their hands, one small measured gesture against the darkness beyond the coast. Each sweep of their circles echoes the sweep of the radar beam itself. A hum that never stops, even when the sirens begin to wail in distant towns. For Britain, the tide of nocturnal war has turned. The ground no longer sleeps. It dreams in coordinates. Strategy has become mathematics. Courage a matter of precision. Humanity has built machines that can see without eyes, and in doing so, forced itself to stare into frightening clarity, where every mistake glows visible in green light. And yet, despite all this brilliance, the hunters are still half blind. They can find, they can track, but they still need something faster, sharper, merciless enough to finish the kill. The narrator draws a breath. The music narrows to a single violin note, because the eyes of Britain have opened now, but what they need next are claws. Across to Havilland's wooden workshops, Carpenters already work through the night, building a Predator so swift, so light it will change the very texture of darkness. It begins not with metal, but with wood. In a war obsessed with armor and alloy, the new Predator seems absurd. A plane built from birch, spruce, and resin. It smells of carpentry rather than combat. Yet by early 1943, in workshops north of London, that smell becomes the scent of revolution. We open on sawdust suspended in sunlight, swirling through factory air as craftsmen tighten clamps around curved veneers. No rivets, no steel shell, only the rhythmic press of glue and the deep hum of imagination. The de Havilland Mosquito, half miracle, half gamble. When the first prototype rolls from its hangar, workers smile as if sharing a secret. The aircraft gleams pale gold under floodlights, its surface smooth as bone. Inside it rests a paradox. Strength through fragility, speed through absence. With no armor or gun turrets, it weighs a full ton less than the fighters meant to protect it. But hidden in that leanness lies its weapon, velocity. Twin Rolls-Royce. Merlin engines ignite with a sound somewhere between thunder and a cello chord. The vibrations strike the chest before the ears. Within seconds, the aircraft lifts effortlessly, slicing through cloud as if bored of gravity. Watching from the ground, even the engineers gasp. The Mosquito climbs past 300 miles an hour and keeps going. Cut to night. RAF Airfield. The new aircraft squats on the tarmac under blackout shade, surfaces darkened with soot to swallow searchlight glint. Pilot Officer Alan Smythe climbs the ladder, helmet tucked under one arm, heartbeat louder than engines not yet spinning. Beside him, his radar operator, Sergeant Tom Boyd, carries the new AI Mk IV set, an awkward, boxy spine of wires and glowing tubes. They strap in. The small cockpit feels almost tender. Two men sharing the narrow warmth of dim gauges. Engines roar. The runway disappears behind them in a flurry of sparks. Now the sky closes like a door. Inside, only voices and instruments remain. Smythe's hands steady on the yoke. Boyd adjusts frequency. Not sight, but signal will lead them tonight. His eyes are fixed on that flickering green scope. Breath slow, fingers poised above tuning knobs. Static fills their headsets, the sound of raw electricity crossing continents. Then faint pulse, range 3 miles, bearing 40 degrees. The hunt begins. The camera of narration widens. Far ahead, a Heinkel III formation crawls back toward France, unaware that wooden ghosts follow. For years the Luftwaffe owned this darkness, skimming cloud tops without fear. Now the rolls invert, Boyd whispers. Contact steady. 1 mile. Smythe cuts throttle, lowering flaps. Engines cool to a feline growl. Through the canopy, only cloud drift and ink-black sky. But the radar sees what eyes cannot. A shape moving in predefined rhythm, blind prey marked by mathematics. Seconds stretch elastic. Then Boyd says quietly, 500 yards. Smythe's thumb clicks the gun trigger. The 4 20mm cannons erupt together, each recoil a heartbeat. Tracers carve invisible arcs ahead. Flames blossom along the Heinkel's wing route. Orange light floods its cockpit. The Mosquito rolls clear, invisible again before the debris has fallen. Back at base, Smythe writes the entry in understatement. Enemy destroyed by AI contact. But the historians reading that log decades later will realize this was the moment heaven acquired new predators. Through 1943, more squadrons join, 85, 157, 219 pilots, nickname the Mosquito the Wooden Wonder, though among German crews it earns darker titles, the Moonshadow, the Silent, Nightmare. Its speed renders interception futile, its radar renders escape impossible. Bomber crews begin dropping loads prematurely, desperate to outrun an invisible chase they can only feel as a prickle at the base of the neck. The narrator's voice softens. War's arithmetic changes. Fewer aircraft, yet more results. Victory by innovation, not by numbers. The darkness itself seems to tilt in Britain's favour, not through brute force, but imagination made solid and airborne. As dawn bleeds into grey horizon, Smythe's Mosquito lands, engines ticking, wingtips glistening with dew. Mechanics rush forward. Boyd climbs down first, face pale from hours staring into green glow. Smythe removes his helmet, exhales, and smiles thinly. The aircraft behind them steams like an animal at rest, a wooden paradox that has learned to hunt. But even as the aircrew debrief inside warm hangars, radios crackle out of Berlin. There, Intelligence officers begin whispering of new Allied wizardry, machines that can see in the night. Skeptics scoff. Fear spreads anyway. Somewhere amid the static, a single order forms. Find out how they're doing it. Because if Britain had learned to pierce the dark, the Reich now intended to steal the light itself. Berlin, late 1943. A rumour scrapes across the corridors of the Luftwaffe High Command. The British have a new weapon, one that turns night into geometry. No one agrees how. Some whisper of invisible lamps guiding their interceptors. Others swear it's witchcraft, light that bends. In a laboratory outside Würzburg, scientists pull charred fragments from a downed mosquito and lay them on steel tables. Bits of circuitry, blistered metal, the unknown heart of a radar set. Specialists lean close, listening almost like priests at confession. Among the wreckage, they find something impossible. A magnetron, a machine no larger than a teacup, yet potent enough to spit microwaves strong enough to paint the sky. They can't duplicate it. German metallurgy fails, then vacuum physics fails, and finally national pride fails. Rage replaces reason. The Reich has fallen a frequency behind. Enter General Joseph Kammhuber, cold, analytical, convinced intellect can restore parity. In his mind, this isn't warfare, it's architecture. He sketches a line on maps, stretching from Denmark to the Swiss border. Thousands of square-mile boxes, defended by towering Würzburg and Freya radars, interlocking beams, night fighter zones, and synchronized searchlights. He calls it the Kammhuber Line. On paper, it looks flawless. A luminous picket fence catching every Allied bomber before it reaches the Ruhr. Within each zone, one radar finds the target. Another guides the defending aircraft directly to it, the searchlight web closing like a fist around a moth. The narrator's tone tightens. In the beginning, it works. British crews feel sudden, inexplicable exposure as multicolored beams spear the clouds, stabbing higher, farther. Voices crack on intercoms. Commanders fear the age of impunity is closing. And yet, within months, the British strike back not with a bomb, but with silence. Cambridge scientists gather in a hut and fold thin strips of aluminum into parcels. They test drop them over empty fields. 15-inch slivers of radar chaos, each one reflecting signal like its own miniature aircraft. The idea seems childish, tinsel against technology. The codename, Window Night, July 1943. Over Hamburg, bomb bays open, not for explosives, not yet, but for light metal snow. 10 million strips drift down through searchlight beams. German screens erupt in static. Blips multiply by thousands, filling operators' scopes until friend and foe blur. The Kammhuber Line dissolves into a wall of meaningless light. Down below, gunners fire at ghosts, burning through ammunition at imaginary targets. In 10 minutes, the world's most sophisticated radar defense becomes blind sculpture, pointing impotently into the heavens. Kammhuber himself watches from a control bunker, eardrums vibrating with angry radio chatter. He demands to know what Britain has done. No answer satisfies. His beautiful geometry has been undone by garbage glitter. The irony bites deeper than defeat. It's the realization that science has no loyalty, that equations serve whoever dares misuse them first. The pace quickens. An electronic duel now consumes both powers. A cat-and-mouse fight invisible to civilians. British engineers shift frequencies nightly. German technicians countertune, invent jammers, rename equipment, rewrite doctrine. Each side hears echoes of the other in their headphones. Shadows of the same signal bouncing endlessly across Europe's black air. Espionage feeds the arms race. Agents smuggle blueprints through neutral Switzerland. Counterfeit components swap hands in Lisbon hotels. Inside both nations, sleepless men trace pencil graphs of sine waves, trying to predict the next move of enemies they'll never see. Above them, bomber and fighter circles close tighter every month. The night war has become an exchange not of lives but of information acquisition. Every kill a measurement, every loss a data set. Technology itself has taken command. Human instinct survives only as calibration error. The narration slows. In the flickering lab light, Kammhuber removes his spectacles, staring at the ruin of one of his radars. Aluminum strips drape its antenna like snow. He understands what his men refuse to admit. The enemy hasn't simply blinded him. They've proven that sight once granted can be stolen. Static fades. The historian's voice lowers, almost mournful. The cage of radar that once promised total control now lies open, its bars luminous only in hindsight. Yet from those ashes, both sides will hunt with new ferocity, convinced that whoever clarifies the night again will rule the war itself. And soon, under the red glow of the hunter's moon, British night fighters would carry that invisible vision into occupied France, turning enemy skies into their own killing ground. The wreckage in France still burns when our view pulls back, across the Channel, across time, back to a Scotland laboratory months before that flaming descent. Fluorescent tubes buzz overhead, rain claws at the windows of RAF Drem. Inside, a handful of engineers and pilots crowd around a table stacked with oscilloscopes, coils, and the heavy brass casing of a contraption that hums faintly, like a living creature dreaming in metal. The calendar says February 1942. Britain is barely breathing between nightly raids. Yet in this small windowless hut, someone is trying to teach a machine to see the unseen. This is Airborne Interception Radar Mk IV. AI, they call it, half joke, half prayer. Cables snake across concrete floors, their insulation sticky with dust. A cathode ray tube flickers, painting ghost green arcs in the dark. Each pulse of light travels out into nothing, then returns with the faintest of replies, a whisper from the clouds. A young radar operator named Peter Jennings watches the display as if it were a heartbeat. Most of the time the screen shows only static, the hiss of cosmic noise. But then, on rare, perfect nights, a small curve rises, distant and uncertain. Maybe weather, maybe an enemy. He learns to read personality in noise, to feel when a signal means something. Outside, technicians tow a twin-engine bow fighter across the tarmac, its fuselage already scarred from test flights. The plan is madness, critics insist. Stick this ungainly 50-kilogram radar into the nose of a combat aircraft and trust it not to short-circuit mid-air. Absurd. Yet desperation makes faith easier. Britain has lost too many nights, too many cities. The work proceeds like a siege against physics. Every failure smells of singed copper and overheated valves. They adjust frequency, recalibrate amplifiers, argue about antenna length until dawn. A simple problem. See an airplane at night. Turns out to contain everything. Electricity, timing, courage, patience. The narration widens. Across the Channel, German intelligence analysts receive intercepted reports describing a new British Funk Mk VIII. Their response? Laughter. They believe no radar could possibly be small enough to fit in an aircraft's nose. The Luftwaffe already controls the night with ground-based systems. They are certain supremacy is built into geography itself. In Berlin's offices, arrogance hardens into policy. Back at Drem, the opposite mood rules, a faith drawn not from power, but necessity. During test flights, Jennings sits behind the pilot in cramped blackness, surrounded by the smell of glue and freezing metal. The radar hum climbs in his ears. Thin green arcs sweep across the circular screen, returning faint peaks whenever a target reflects their invisible finger of energy. The peaks grow, shift right, grow again. He shouts over the intercom, "Steady bearing, closing, 200 yards." The pilot adjusts trim. Outside, the darkness remains absolute. He sees nothing, no lights, no stars, only instruments. Then a shape materializes, a bomber, dim and enormous. The pilot's gloved finger tightens on the trigger. The first human kill guided by airborne radar is seconds away. The weapon proves itself not by brilliance, but by silence. The documentary voice slows, reverent. With that burst of gunfire, a new language of war is born, one written in pulses, measured in microseconds. Every future night will now hinge on invisible timing. Elsewhere, scientists note the data dispassionately. Range 1 mile, accuracy within 20 yards, beam width 3 degrees. Numbers, yes, but each number is a revelation. By spring, the prototype becomes doctrine. The Airborne Interception Radar Mk IV is standardized, installed across fighter squadrons from Norfolk to Yorkshire. The Air Ministry's announcement is brief and coded, classified as general equipment improvement. But among pilots, rumors spread. Crews whisper about the sightless eye, the device that makes darkness loud enough to hear. In London, planners debate which aircraft should carry it. The final answer seems almost accidental. A lightweight, all-wood fighter with no defensive guns and a speed no enemy bomber can match. The de Havilland Mosquito, the perfect host for an invisible predator. Down at Drem, Jennings signs off from another test flight. His voice recorder captures the last line of his log. Target acquired by instruments alone. It sounds innocuous, but it means eternity has just blinked. The narration narrows, nearly whispers. For centuries, darkness was humankind's oldest ally and oldest fear. Tonight, someone has pierced it with a signal that, by every rule of the old world, shouldn't exist. When those first radar-guided fighters took off from their Scottish airfields, the night itself began to switch allegiances. And soon, every screen in Britain would be watching the same trembling green line. By the winter of 1944, the sky itself had learned to speak in code. Across the channel, control rooms hummed with electricity and exhaustion. Every night meant another test of faith in invisible instruments, machines that saw, heard and hunted in frequencies beyond human sense. And for the first time, even the men who built them began to realize the war of steel and fire had split in two. There was the war the world could see, and another waged in silence. We open in darkness over the Rhine. A Mosquito night fighter cuts through layered cloud, its exhaust dimmed to almost nothing. Inside, Pilot Officer Alan Smythe grips the stick while his radar operator, Tom Boyd, whispers bearings. The German night fighter belt lies ahead. Radar stations, listening posts, flak. But somewhere inside that labyrinth, another hunter stalks them. Boyd's scope shows a faint echo, a second reflection, ghosting their own signal. For a moment he doesn't understand. Then the chill runs through him. We're being painted by our own pulse. The Luftwaffe has caught up. German engineers have developed Naxos detectors, devices tuned to sniff out the exact wavelength emitted by Allied radars. No sight, no sound, only a telltale heartbeat of radiation guiding their counterstroke. Within weeks, British crews begin vanishing for reasons no one can see. Wartime irony has reached its purest form. Technology built to find the enemy now leads the enemy straight to them. To counter, the Allies designed Monika, a tail-mounted early warning radar fitted to bombers. But the Germans answer with Flensburg, a receiver that turns Monika's signal into a deadly beacon. Within months, it's recall and redesign, then reissue, retest. Each side chases the phantom contrails of the other, trading pulses like dueling violinists who've gone deaf. The narration quickens, two perspectives now, weaving through the same airspace. Scene 1. Smythe's Mosquito slips low under cloud, chasing a faint echo westward. He believes it's a retreating Ju 88. Scene 2. In that very Ju 88, Oberleutnant Kruger, one of the few survivors from the Ghost Hunter raids, listens to his Flensburg receiver grow louder. Each assumes he's the pursuer. Each flies deeper into the other's scope. Night distorts judgment. Radar ghosts multiply. Two signals merge, then split, then merge again. Somewhere below them, a British bomber stream bound for Mannheim breaks through cloud cover. Thousands of tons of explosives aimed at the city's industrial maze. Ground defenses awaken. Searchlights flare into the sky like veins of blue glass, flak blossoms in cascading rhythm. Inside the Mosquito, Boyd's voice hardens. Multiple contacts. Everything's moving. Smythe nods, though there's nothing left to see. Only green lines quivering across a phosphor circle. 5,000 feet away, German interceptors converge on the same cluster of echoes. Each radar screen so crowded with false returns that it feels like staring into madness. Radio frequencies jam with overlapping orders. Climb, dive, turn left. Voices blur. Morse bleeds into static. Somewhere, a pilot screams coordinates no one can hear. Then the real fight begins. The soundless ballet of aircraft twisting through radar saturation. Engines roar and stall. Tracer arcs cut pure geometry into the dark. The camera of narration flicks between faces. Concentration. Terror. Desperate calm. For 10 minutes. No one controls anything. It's no longer strategy. It's raw perception. Instinct honed within seconds. Smythe rolls left into fire. Kruger drops through his own turbulence. Another German fighter collides with a bomber clouded by window chaff and vanishes in flame. Above it all, radar operators on both sides watch confusion rendered as light. A living painting of chaos. And then, as if exhausted by its own complexity, the storm burns out. Each pilot who survives drifts away from the inferno alone, instruments blistered with heat, headsets filled with whispering static. The sun begins to rise over the Rhine, dull and grey as old paper. The historian's voice slows to a measured timbre. When dawn touches the airfields on both sides, victory is unreadable. No front lines have shifted. No cities have changed hands. Yet something fundamental has changed. The night no longer belongs to shadow. It belongs to signal, to those who can read noise and silence as weapon and warning alike. From this point on, every sortie, every interception will depend on frequency, not faith. The chapter pauses on a melancholy image. Wreckage scattered across farmland, pieces of aircraft intertwined like crossed circuitry. Under frost and smoke, both sides lie equal before the dawn, their ghosts indistinguishable. As the decoding of darkness reached perfection, men began to wonder whether the price of such clarity would be their own humanity, and soon the numbers would answer for them. By the spring of 1944, the numbers looked like triumph. Neat, mathematical, bloodless. 2,000 Luftwaffe aircraft lost in night combat. Allied bomber losses cut by a third. Sortie success rates rising like temperature in a closed room. On paper, the Allies had mastered the night, but the paper never showed the trembling hands that filled in those columns. We enter a control room before dawn. Cigarette smoke curled around green screens, an operator's pencil smudging graphite across the logbook margin. She's 20 years old, hair pinned tight, voice hoarse from hours of radio calls. For every glowing blip she guided home, another vanished into static. Somewhere above France, another crew never answered back. And in that unanswered click of the radio key, human cost hid behind perfection. The historian's tone slows, reverent. The age of invisible war had reached its crescendo. Yet the silence afterward weighed heavier than the victories themselves. Fragments tell the story better than statistics ever could. A diary pulled from a crashed Mosquito reads, "The dark hums. I swear you can hear it breathe. We chase ghosts, and sometimes they chase us." From the German side, another note, written in graphite on torn map paper, "They kill us before we see them. The fear is in the sound of our own engines." Different uniforms, but the same confession. Terror without witness. Night combat had always promised anonymity, but radar made it absolute. Men killed one another guided only by electricity, by echoes. The last thing most ever saw was a flare of their own cockpit lighting, 1 second before it turned to fire. The camera widens. Across quiet airfields at dawn, ground crews pick through twisted ruins glowing faintly in first light. A de Havilland Mosquito, once sleek and bright, now scattered across frost and grass. A German Ju 88 resting nose down in a field of mustard flowers, wings melting under the sun. War's machinery reduced to sculpture. Analytical rhythm merges with reflection. Britain's radar network, improvised, experimental, often temperamental, had done more than save cities. It shortened the war's nocturnal phase by nearly 18 months. The constant bombings that once bled London dry faltered as German crews refused to fly blind. The Wizard War, as Churchill quietly called it, ended not with a bang, but with exhaustion. One where mathematics finally overpowered mythology. Yet the moral arithmetic remains cruel. For every leap of technology, there's an echo of loss. Victory through calculation does not harden the heart. It only teaches it colder precision. The narration slows further, contemplative. When the Berlin Wall finally fell decades later, museums would display the same radar sets once used to kill men as artifacts of progress. Engineers would refine magnetrons into microwave ovens. The same invisible waves that hunted bombers now heat dinners, measure storms, guide passenger planes softly across oceans. Peace built upon repurposed war. It's strange, the afterlife of desperation. The weapon that once saved Britain now saves travellers who may never know its origin. The storyteller's voice lowers, intimate. But to the few survivors of that dark aerial duel, trophies and exhibits meant little. They remembered only sound, the intermittent hum of generators, the heartbeat thump of rotating dishes, the static murmur that separated a life saved from a life erased. In their dreams, the radar blip still moves, and somewhere, high above France, engines still echo across the decades, phantom vibrations passing through time, through ether, through memory. The historian closes the ledger. The numbers remain immutable. The silence that follows is not peace, but comprehension. Because in mastering the unseen, humankind touched something deeper than victory. It reached into the darkness, and brought it home. Static fades to quiet. In the night over France, humanity first learned that to master darkness is to risk never sleeping soundly again.